Okay, well, let's switch to chapter 8 here, which is The Storm Gathers. So Nynaeve awakens as she and Elaine ready themselves for the day. Elaine tells her about what happened in Teleron Riyadh after Nynaeve and Leanne leave. Nynaeve begins to grumble about how the Aes Sedai think they know everything, and then mentions to Elaine that she thinks she saw Rand in Teleron Riyadh, and Elaine, says she moans the fact that she isn't with him. After they finish dressing and Elaine leaves, Nynaeve wanders off to find Mog who it is, which Moghedien. To me, it's Moghedien.
Moghedien.
I actually don't know how I don't know how they get Moghedien, right?
I know, right?
There's only one D, so Moghedien. She finds the Forsaken washing clothes with some other woman. The woman in charge tells Nynaeve that Morel had told her that Marigan could help her with the washing. So Nynaeve takes off. As she walks, she sees Morella, but luckily for Nynaeve, the Aes Sedai does not notice her. Eventually, she finds Logain, who is surrounded by people. He is telling them the story of how the Red Aja set him up as a false dragon. Leyline and her warder, Burin Shireen, are keeping a watch over him. When he finishes his tale, Leyline assures him that Logain no longer wants glory and that their lands are in no danger from him. When she notices Nynaeve hastily curtsies and then hurries off. Next, Nynaeve comes upon Siuan, who is facing off Garth Bryn. They are fighting over the fact that he tried to pay her a compliment and how she nearly snapped his head for it. After Garth Bryn leaves, Nynaeve informs Siuan that she meant to study her stilling since Nynaeve had only 2 chances so far to study her. Leanne shows up. I tried to talk them out of it, only they had not listened to you enough to consider it. You won't be meeting the wise ones tonight. She and Siuan walk off. Lelaine, is that it? Is it Lelaine?
Lelaine.
Right.
Lelaine.
Okay, sorry, I was pronouncing it wrong. Who is standing between them, remarked that Siuan and Leanne should be sent off to Tiana, the mistress of novices, for always seeming to fight with each other. Leyline then asked Nynaeve what she thinks Rand will do. Nynaeve tells Leyline that she has not seen Rand in half a year, and she knows nothing of what he is doing. She goes on to mention Egwene, Mat, and Perrin, and then tries to talk Nynaeve out of trying to heal Siuan and Leanne, but she refuses. When Nynaeve leaves, she passes Uno. This is a funny scene, right? Who is training heavy cavalry for the Saladar army. He smiles at her, and she moves on. She eventually runs into Elaine's novice class as she watches Theoden approach her. They speak of Nynaeve's block, and he informs Nynaeve that they will work on breaking her block the next day. That was like the most interesting thing from this chapter. Nynaeve goes back to her room to lie down when Moghedien bursts in the room, angry that her hands are wrinkly from doing laundry. Nynaeve tells Moghedien that she wants to go over the lesson of learning to deflect a man channeling again. After quite a while of practicing, Elaine enters the room with news that an emissary from the White Tower has arrived. So yeah, this chapter definitely had a little bit of well-placed comedy in it with, sort of with the Elaine and Rand and Nynaeve conversation, like, oh, he needs what he's always needed, a good slap on the forehead. Like that was in there. And then like the summary just sort of says they walked by Uno, but I'm pretty sure the text, it said something about him being a little more crass and like cursing with, like he's like teaching the class, which was pretty funny. And then, like even the stuff with Moghedien, it's like here you've got, Moghedien doing laundry. I mean, it's like ridiculous.
I know. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah. So, Morrigan, thinking she's washing clothes and doing stuff, and then wants to use her. So this whole, thing is the interesting part about this section of the story is that Nynaeve and Elaine have gone off and done these great things. They've come back and they've got precious artifacts. They understand more about the Black Aja, sit on a special mission, all that good stuff. So they come into Salidar, and they now, through having Moghedien, they like have all these different powers and talents and stuff, right? They're learning stuff and they're passing stuff on and they're teaching stuff to to other people. So that's interesting. But yet at the same time, they're doing all these chores and they're running around doing all these different things and stuff. It's kind of crazy. Though the interesting part about this too is Logain, right, who's surrounded by people, and he's telling his story of how the Red Aja set him up as a false dragon. Now that's a big deal because there are no Reds in Salidar unless of this emissary who's showing up at the end, right? There's somebody showing up from the White Tower, and Logain is basically saying that the Red Aja set him up to take him down, right? Like that this is all an inside job, and it makes them sort of look bad. They're telling lords and people, anybody who will listen. So Nynaeve and others kind of walk across that and get that vibe. That is going to be something to pay attention, because what is he supposed to do right now, right? I mean, he is gentled, and so he needs a kind of a purpose to keep going. And there's this promise of revenge against the Red Aja
and not that I want to shift conversation way outside of where we're at right now, but do you think that's going to be season 2 of Wheel of Time? This conversation right here, because if you look at what they're doing with Logain in the show,
way sped up.
Like,
right?
I think this is book 6, but I feel like that could be season 2 of the show.
I know, right? They've taken
because they built him up like he's a huge part of season 1.
Right, so you go all this time where he doesn't really have a lot happening or whatever, and once he's in Salidar, I mean, literally
Tons
everything
of stuff starts happening.
the whole thing. So it's like they might not do it in Salidar, right? They might not push the whole White Tower divide that far, but you could start with this. Maybe he doesn't do it. Who knows who he starts telling this to? Right, he's talking to the Blues. Maybe actually he's a part of the fracture in the White Tower, right? If he starts, saying he wants some sort of revenge and whatever. Although the way they kind of do it, it's like it's no longer in the show, right? It's no longer just the Reds. It's actually now everybody who was there. And that's going to be another thing, which I didn't even think about at the time of the show, but really what keeps him going and not committing suicide or not whatever, just giving up the will to live, is that he wants revenge, and he that's the only thing he can think of right now. There's more for him for sure, but it's like
that should be our extended for today. Logain's role in season 2, because when I was reading this, I was like, again, because even in the books, it's like, man, Logain's a guy I really want to learn more about, and we like that's why the last book, one of the things I actually liked about it is to start off, it's like, we're with Logain, like this is awesome, like and then you don't really see him, like he's just kind of there. But now it's like, okay, I feel like we're finally starting to get like some cool Logain stuff.
Right, exactly. The other thing too, and always pay attention to writers do this, is I love when this kind of stuff happens, is the proximity of other events related to other events inside the same chapter. You know what I mean? When you put something like Logain talking to Altarans and nobles and the Red Aja next to everything else that's happening in this chapter. So I don't want to like give anything away by telling you exactly what it is we should be focusing on in relation to Logain, but there's a lot of things that are happening here that like Nynaeve's talking about sensing a storm, right? They talk about there's somebody showing up from the White Tower. And there's talk of Elida. There's talk of Nynaeve's block and Nynaeve trying to study stilling. She wants to study Suwan and all that kind of stuff. So it's just something to kind of pay attention to, because there's so many of these things are tied together, and a lot happens here for these characters to develop. And it's crazy because at this point of the story, I feel like it is. I mean, we talked at the beginning of the episode. It's almost a good time to maybe keep our 3-hour chunks, because there are so many more characters and there's so many. Like the story does not like start to narrow in on Rand and others. Not at all, my friend. Literally, the whole Salidar camp is a huge deal. They have sent their individuals. Let me get this right. They sent their group to Camelin, right? Elaine is reflecting on that. The White Tower sent their unit, their emissaries, to Kyrian. This whole book is about these two groups going or whatever, and they are led by like a whole different batch of Aes Sedai that you have to know and follow and understand and look for dark in among. That's what makes it really fascinating, but also overwhelming. I got to the point where my first read, I was like, I don't even care who these people are anymore. I just want to know. You got to keep tracking your people in among. And actually, that's what Robert. Actually, that's a tactic. I've read some other articles, like when I was first going through the series. he throws so many characters at you, so that way you're looking every possible different direction. So you miss those dark friends. You miss those people who are going to stab you in the back. And it's actually a brilliant kind of way to almost overwhelm you a little bit. And then you didn't see something coming. But then sometimes you have to, so you have to go back on the reread and say, God, you can see that a mile away, but also it's tough. It's also one of those things that's still like, there's so much going on. It's a lot to keep track of. So yeah, this chapter is called The Storm Gathers. And Nynaeve, another thing she's doing is she's sensing the change, that a storm is coming, but it looks clear. Like, what is it? What's the thing that she's sensing? Is it really a storm? Is it really a dark energy? What is it that she and Egwene back in Two Rivers are always feeling? They feel like they can listen to the wind, and they can kind of hear. That's right. That every chapter, every book opens up with the wind blowing and coming in from a certain region and stuff. And Robert Jordan kind of keeps that whole thing going. So this is a cool chapter for. This was one of the three. I think this was the shorter one. I think, or maybe this was still an hour. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's really confined to them wanting to study the stilling, Logain telling his story, and then all the busyness, I guess, of Salidar. So
yeah. So great chapter. And yeah, again, for me, the big takeaway was, man, Logain and talking about the Red Aja set him up. It's gonna be very interesting to see where that goes forward, just because he's becoming a big player, and he,
right.
I mean, obviously he can't channel anymore, but hey, you never know, right? So
yeah, you never know. And one final thing,
he could still lead an army.
He could still absolutely. I love Logain, and I love what they did in the show. I remember when the show started. Anytime now that when I started the when I started the reread with you, we call Rand the Lord Dragon, and we make sure we give him his title, right? But at the time when you start this series, it's Logain the Lord Dragon. All right, he is people call him a false dragon. At the time, I don't know anybody else who's challenging and saying, "Hey, I'm the dragon." So you don't have two contenders right there at the time. Once you get later in the series, you might make a case otherwise. But yeah, it's like I like to call him Lord Dragon. I think I probably would have got behind him. Like his speech in season 1, the way they did that was so good.
So good. The actor they have playing him too is almost like exactly how I envisioned Logain. So,
I know. Yeah.
Very much a fan of that. Okay. Chapter 9 here. This sort of shifts points of view a little bit. So chapter 9, plan.